So remember last week I said I was going to be playing Marguerite Waltz? No. I'm actually switching my song to Johann Sebastian Bach's Minuet Number 3. Why? Well, it's more pedagogically appropriate for me. That other one is too difficult, plus it just doesn't sound good. So I'm going to go ahead and play this, and then we'll get into the Potter stuff and media literacy. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. That's a good starting point for this song. What I intend to do with this is basically learn along with you in parallel. You're not studying music, but I am. You're studying media literacy. And last week we had a short introduction, learned a little bit about you. I hope you learned a little bit about the course and some of the peers in here while you're all taking this course. But let's get right to it. I selected your textbook, honestly, because the previous instructor had adopted that book. But in reading and doing some research on W. James Potter, he's a professor of journalism from University of California, Santa Cruz. And what I like about his textbook and his approach to it is that after reading the chapters, you will gain a vocabulary. And you're going to use that vocabulary in order to discuss and further explore the topics in each chapter. And they're vitally important to the whole concept of media literacy. So chapter 1 and 2 deal with like the very beginning of media literacy. And Potter's style is a little bit sometimes alarmist. I don't know if he thinks that's a motivating factor, but students in the past have they express shock, and maybe that's just their alarmist writing back to me. But they're amazed at the facts and figures thrown around, and at times it can seem a little bit end of the worldish or calamitous. Everything's going to be okay as long as you learn your media literacy. So in the first chapter, what he does is goes ahead and poses the problem. We're receiving more messages every day. There's more focus required. It takes our attention away and so forth. And it creates a bit of a mental burden. He also goes into, and this kind of leads into some of the cognitive development that you elementary ed majors are going to be concerned with, or should be anyway. He covers some of the biological hardware in our brains, our eyes, our ears, what we can perceive. He gives a good example of subliminal messages, like if our hearing range is from low notes to high notes, and this is the range at which we can hear things, if someone does like a dog whistle or a high-pitched note outside of our hearing range, can we ever receive that message? No. So he kind of, in a sense, and I think his writing isn't that clear at this point, but when he talks about that, he's meaning to say that subliminal messages are not a real thing, because if you can't perceive them, you can't ever receive them. But going back to children's education and their exposure to media, it's important to understand children's cognitive development, because they're not able to look at media, at television shows, newspapers, pictures, etc., the way adults are. They don't understand the difference between content of a program they like to watch and commercials that are inserted in between them. And so if you go back to like American television in the 50s and 60s, you'll see all sorts of ads by characters of the show telling them that they'll be growing up to be big and healthy if they eat this particular cereal, or if they get their parents to buy them this toy, or whatever it is. And so at some point in the 70s, federal law was enacted to remove or put distinct breaks in between children's programming commercials, and also to limit the amount of time. He then goes on in chapter 2, and this is what I want you to pay attention to, is he provides a definition of media literacy. We're going to cut that definition apart, and I want you to personalize it. It doesn't do any good to just memorize text out of a book from some guy in California. It has to mean something to you. So that's part of what we're going to be doing this week. And he talks about the kind of the constituent factors of what media literacy is: skills, knowledge base, and focus. And there's ways, and we'll learn about this later, there's ways that you can improve all those things to increase your media literacy. And then finally, he talks about, not finally, I got one more thing after this. He says, he talks about the media literacy development scale. And that's one of the things I want you to do. After you're looking at that, you should be able to identify where you are on this list, and more importantly, where you need to go. And especially for those who are considering becoming teachers of young children, or people that are just going to go into this media-rich landscape, it's important, and he calls them advantages. I call them crucial life skills. You need to have the utmost high-level media literacy so you can determine what's real, what's not, what are the motives and intentions of advertisers and publishers, and why they're sending you these things. And more importantly, you'll be able to find media sources and information that are going to better serve you. So go ahead and read these 2 chapters, and I'll see you in the discussion board.